by our Director of Public Policy. He had a family emergency, he couldn't make it down. So I'll be delivering this presentation. As Kwaku mentioned, before I was at the GSMA, I spent a number of years as an analyst, as an equity analyst for a brokerage on Wall Street. So I have some idea of what analysts, what economists look for in terms of attractiveness of a particular market for investment. And I'd like to frame this discussion on tax in terms of what needs to be done to attract more direct foreign investment, what needs to be done to attract more investment in infrastructure, in spectrum, in networks generally. And taxation plays a very important role in this. So the title of this presentation is Reducing Sector-Specific Taxes on SIM Cards and Consumption Could Be Beneficial. I think we could replace could with will be beneficial because there is a large body of evidence to show that reduced taxation on sector-specific, reduction of sector-specific taxes actually does lead to an increase in consumption. So the mobile telecoms industry is a significant contributor to national economies. Mobile services stimulate activities in the wider economy, boosting GDP, as I showed in the previous presentation, generating jobs, increasing productivity. There's also social benefits related to access to education, financial services, healthcare. Sector-specific taxes on mobile telecom service can distort these benefits, can effectively discourage usage, make it cost prohibitive, prevent take-up of the services, and hinder investment in networks and services. And we see here that tax as a proportion of total cost of ownership in some countries is above the global average. You can see in the back there, Ghana is right about in the middle. So there are some countries, this is the total cost of ownership from the perspective of the subscriber, the consumer. There are obviously some countries that are at an entirely different level. There are some that closer to the global average here. What we see in Ghana is the total cost of ownership about 22%. Our position would be that to encourage consumption, to encourage the benefits that come from consumption, GDP, jobs, tax revenue, long-term tax revenue, that is, that the sector-specific taxes should be reduced. So in Ghana, consumers and businesses face a high level of mobile taxation. The tax burden faced by mobile consumers and operators has increased from 2007 to 2011. I think you'll find a lot of countries that's probably the case. I think countries, governments scrambled following the global financial crisis to try to bring in as much revenue as possible. The telecom sector seems like a very reliable source of free cash flow, so it's obviously been targeted for increased taxation, but I think ultimately to generate the benefits, you should take a longer-term view. According to the Ministry of Finance, 37% of local operator revenue is captured by taxes. This does not include the taxes and fees paid to local assemblies, and Kwaku alluded to the good work that the NCA has been doing to help harmonize some of these taxes so that there is some predictability, some transparency in terms of what these local assemblies can actually charge. But this particular issue here, I can tell you as an investment analyst, when you're trying to look at a particular market, you build Excel models, you have assumptions. The one thing that'll always turn you off from a particular market is lack of information, lack of data, and unpredictability. To the extent that we can take lack of information and unpredictability out of the tax regime, the more foreign direct investment, the more investment in networks that we'll see. So what are some of the sector-specific taxes that we're talking about? 20% special import duty charged on SIM cards, 6% tax on airtime communications, which from my understanding is charged at the wholesale level and the retail level. I understand there is some controversy about the payments of that and their legality. 6 cents per minute special tax on incoming international calls, which we believe is a direct culprit for some of the SIM boxing activity that we've been seeing. and annual regulatory fees paid to the NCA. Now, some of these are pretty standard. Virtually every operator everywhere in the world pays some amount of fees to the regulator. You see a 15% value-added tax on services and products. Now, this is a bit high, but this is something that's more a macro issue. Health investments are cross-subsidized through national health insurance levy. Yes, that you find that in some places. Corporate income tax, I think virtually every corporation pays some degree of corporate income tax. Withholding taxes on dividend, that's another issue. But generally, with all of these points here, there should be some flexibility to reduce the tax burden and to make it more predictable and easier for investors to forecast the level of investment that will be required, taking this into account. What we've seen, case studies of where reducing sector-specific taxes has actually benefited in terms of benefited countries, governments, businesses, and citizens. Generally, high taxes or unpredictable taxes send the wrong signal in terms of consumption and investment. We've covered this point here. I wanted to bring to your attention this data we have from Kenya, which, and I realize there's no value-added tax on handsets in Ghana, which I think is great. This 20% tax on SIM cards, however, we could maybe make a parallel with this tax that the Kenyan authorities abolished in 2009. Between 2009 and 2011, we saw a 200% increase in handset purchases. Mobile penetration increased 20 percentage points. And ultimately, in 2011, there was a 33% increase in government tax revenue from the operators compared to the period when the value-added tax was still applied. So we're not saying less taxes. What we're actually saying is reducing certain taxes actually brings you greater tax revenue in the long term. And a very nuanced and careful approach should be made to looking at what sector-specific taxes actually distort the market and reduce consumption. Here we have a graph illustrating the mobile take-up and handset sales in Kenya after the handset tax was removed, beginning, I believe, in the second quarter or third quarter. We see a very dramatic increase in handset sales. Taxes on incoming international traffic. I understand this tax has raised somewhere $70 million for the Treasury. I believe that was, I'm not sure if that was last year or the 64 million, was it in 2010? In 2010. Generally, what we see here is this additional, in green, this is the additional amount that the cost of the call is raised by. We see countries like Senegal and Gabon, which either considered such levies or had them implemented but ultimately removed them. We see it has a very direct impact on the cost of international traffic into the country. Levying this tax does increase the cost of calling the country. Other countries could reciprocate. It could have negative unintended consequences. We want to encourage cross-border economic activity. It creates opportunities for arbitrage, as I mentioned, SIM boxing, and I think all of the operators in this room can attest the difficulties in dealing with SIM boxing, other than perhaps our colleagues from the CDMA side. Damages to international reputation, significant implementation costs for no added value. I realize $64 million can be considered as an added value, but ultimately it's not good for the long-term growth of the country. Governments should move towards an optimal tax regime. We believe that there should be a balance between revenue, socioeconomic development, and international competitiveness. Taxing mobile telecoms as a luxury good is not aligned with other policy goals. So having a special tax on airtime is exactly the wrong message, I think, the wrong policy agenda when you're looking to promote increased consumption, increased usage. Revenues from high taxes in the short term may outweigh the lost GDP and socioeconomic benefits. Again, I mentioned sending the wrong signals for consumption and investment. We want to align with the global digital economy. We want to increase consumption of mobile to benefit the country, to create jobs, to create GDP, and ultimately more tax revenue. And that is the end of my slides on taxation.